Rivian's making even more moves with the R2 unveil next month. They're still trying to find ways to sweeten the deal for the R1T and R1S, and I don't think this was anyone's dream, really, to have 4 different battery size options. I don't think this is really what RJ wants. It's probably very complicated manufacturing-wise to have so many colors, so many tire options, so many powertrain options as well, and now we're complicating batteries in the mix. But it's likely because Rivian is starting to experience, like much of the EV industry, a little bit of a demand slump, and I don't think there's one sole reason, but I'm sure the higher interest rates are not helping all that much, as well as the fact that Rivian has also been delivering R1 vehicles for quite some time now. It's been a couple of years since first delivery started, and that means you got a lot of launch editions that are still amazing, great vehicles, but they've been out for a while, so you can find them used, and there's less and less reason for people to buy new now because the used market is getting pretty competitive, especially if you look around on sites like Car and Bids and what R1Ts are selling for. I don't blame people for wanting to buy used, and there's not that many new perks of buying brand new. There's a longer wait time usually, and buying it brand new, of course, is going to be more expensive. So to help combat this, Rivian has introduced 2 lower range battery options that they're calling Standard Plus and Standard, which is hilarious how much Rivian is just following in Tesla's footsteps, almost down to the branding. And I originally was looking at these battery options with Standard Plus being 315 miles of range. I still think that's great personally, and then Standard being 270 miles, and I was like, why don't you just call it a mid-range battery? Why do you have to do Standard and Standard Plus? I don't know, that just sounds a little annoying. But dug a little bit more into the details here, and I realized that they are very much following in Tesla's footsteps, because from what I understand, Standard Plus and Standard are actually the same battery pack. They are just software limiting that Standard battery by a whopping 40 miles. So I've already seen a few people say, well, just buy the Standard and treat it like it's an LFP battery, you know, charge it up to 100% every day, because you're not actually going to be accessing the entire battery pack, which I would still remain a little skeptical on. I would fall back on whatever the software in the car tells you to do, just because while in theory it makes sense that they would cap the top of the battery pack, or the top and bottom would just have a thicker buffer, there's still some weirder things we've seen Tesla do, and Rivian is a new company, so we don't know what they're experimenting with, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility for Rivian to put in some dummy cells or put in battery packs that have more limited capacity than the Standard Plus does, which means that if you are charging it to full every day, you still might degrade it faster than otherwise. So I hope they're the exact same battery pack on the inside, but Rivian has not said that you're going to be able to unlock the Standard battery to access the same range as the Standard Plus battery via software update, you know, an after delivery purchase. Tesla used to do things like that in the past, but they haven't done it recently, and Rivian's not promising that, so don't get your hopes up for it. But that also ties into the battery chemistry here. Rivian has also disclosed that these are not lithium iron phosphate battery packs, which for someone like me, that's a bit of a bummer, because I love LFP. You can charge it to full all the time. You get more access to that fully unlocked range. They last longer. They have higher cycle life. They're also safer. It's a more stable battery chemistry, but if you live in the colder climate, you might look at that as somewhat of an advantage, because LFP's downside is that it takes a while to precondition, because it runs a lot colder than most nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries do, which means that the standard range batteries in the Rivian are basically the same chemistry, probably the exact same cells that are in the large battery pack. There's just less of them, so you might not get to say that there's 7,777 cells anymore, but on the regular standard pack, they're saying you're still being able to access about 106 kilowatt hours and getting 270 miles of range out of it, which, given the fact it's a pickup truck, I would actually say the efficiency is pretty good. This is a smaller battery pack than what's in the Cybertruck, and it's still able to get close to the same amount of range, at least that the Cybertruck gets with those bigger tires. Still has a great dual motor powertrain, and Rivian saying that the powertrain is the same. We don't know if the charging curve is going to be a lot different on these. Could be a little bit better, could be a little bit worse, depending on whether you're charging from the top or bottom, but still, all-wheel drive, a great amount of performance. I love the R1T. It's a fantastic vehicle, so I'm grateful that they're making it more affordable with that standard range option now starting at just under $70,000, although it doesn't qualify for the full $7,500 tax credit. It still qualifies for half the credit, which is better than nothing, I guess. And it just means that this incredible vehicle is a bit more affordable with not as much range as before, but I think that for a lot of people, 270 miles is plenty. That's what I started with my Model 3, and I've put over 32,000 miles on it in the past year and a half. It's very much possible with a good home charging system and a decent DC fast charging network to get a lot of miles on the road regularly, and Rivian's expanding their adventure network every week, so I think a lot of people will be surprised how much driving you can actually get done with the lowest range option. In my opinion, 270 miles is honestly not that low. But if you want a little bit more, if you want to exceed the 300-mile range mark, which in my opinion, real-world driving, you're not going to notice a big difference in. Honestly, at the end of the day, it's the same battery pack, just with a little bit more buffer unlocked. It's a $3,000 upcharge to get the range to 315 miles, but again, these are nickel-based batteries, so you're probably going to be charging it to 80% or 90% every day, not 100. So the difference between the 270 and the 315, I don't think is that big a deal. But what I'm more concerned about is the complicated manufacturing line here, because Rivian is still offering at the same price as before the large battery, which should go over 350 miles per charge, and the max pack, which is over 400 miles per charge, and same number of cells, just different chemistry, and now that's an additional $19,000 opposed to the standard range, which has the same powertrain, you know, you have the same interior options, same size bed, same size frunk, and all that. Yeah, now more than ever, I absolutely think the max pack is not worth it. We've seen in real world driving tests that it's not as big of a range advantage as it appears. Don't rely too heavily on the EPA test cycle. That is not the end-all be-all for range, especially if you're towing, which is the main reason people want to opt for the max pack. If you're towing, then the range advantage is like an extra 20 miles for an additional $10,000 compared to the large pack. So if I was looking at Rivian's manufacturing line, I would simplify a lot. I would cut out a few more color options, and I would ditch the max pack, honestly. Just, I don't think people should really be buying that. It looks good on paper, but it is not worth it in any kind of real world scenario. And I was really hoping that Rivian would stick to their word and offer a lithium iron phosphate standard range Rivian this year, and through some tweets they've claimed that they still plan on offering that later this year, which just confuses me even more, because that means if you order one of these standard range Rivians today, first of all, the website does not make very clear if these vehicles are in production yet and how long the wait is. If you buy from inventory, it's supposed to only take 1 to 6 weeks, but of course there's no standard range Rivians in inventory yet. So if you're doing a custom order, they say it should arrive in about 4 months. So we're talking taking delivery in summer of 2024, but then Rivian also says a lithium iron phosphate standard range Rivian is coming later in the year, just a couple months after that. Like, why can't we just start with the lithium iron phosphate battery packs right now? I know they won't qualify for the tax credit, but they're only qualifying for half the credit now, so I don't think it's a huge loss, and I bet a lot of people would rather have access to the full 100% battery pack, and they'd rather one that lasts longer. Plus, I just love the idea of a pickup truck out there that's smaller and easier to drive and park. R1T still has a great turning radius, by the way, but having over 100 kilowatt hours of lithium iron phosphate that hypothetically RJ has said Rivians have the hardware to do vehicle to home or vehicle to grid, so I could power my house with a battery pack with a high cycle life that's over 100 kilowatt hours, and we'll be able to access the supercharger network soon. Oh my god, that just sounds like an incredible vehicle, especially when it eventually gets NACS. That's going to be a best bang for your buck, and I think that might tie into the demand a little bit. A lot of people might want a Rivian, but are waiting until they can get the NACS port right on there. They are waiting for the charging infrastructure to improve, and in a lot of ways it already has, between Rivian expanding the adventure network and Tesla also kind of quietly and secretly updating a lot of the superchargers with magic docks to no longer be limited to 350 amps, which was the original reason if you took a Rivian to a supercharger, it could only charge at about 150 kilowatts, which when you have a giant 130 kilowatt hour battery pack, that's not all that fast. But more recently, people have been testing it and getting close to the peak speed that Rivians are supposed to get, like 215 kilowatts through a magic dock at a V3 station. And I bet they'll charge even better at the V4 stations as those expand and get more plentiful across the country. Honestly, the Rivian is still a very fantastic product, and I'm excited to see how they improve on that. And I do think a lot of the future of EVs getting more affordable is going to be lower range, and I think people are going to slowly accept that range is not everything, and you don't necessarily need an EV to go over 300 miles per charge in order to have a great road trip experience with it. It really just comes down to charger availability and good charging curve, and I predict that these lower range options are probably still going to work fairly well for a lot of people who are primarily driving around town, getting work done, or driving up into the mountains and back, which I think 270 miles is probably fine, but we'll see when someone actually starts taking delivery of these cheaper options. Of course, everything applies to the R1S as well. There's a cheaper starting price, and three-row SUVs are incredibly popular in the US R1S. The R1S was already one of the best-selling EVs in the country, despite its high price. Now it's even cheaper, and I bet there's a lot of, you know, higher income families that don't necessarily do a lot of road tripping with the SUV, but still would like a more affordable option. So there you go. Good call on Rivian, but I think they need to simplify manufacturing a little bit more, especially if they want to stop losing so much money on every vehicle sold. I'm sure these price cuts are not going to help with their margins. I highly doubt that they're going to start breaking even on the R1 vehicles. They were already losing $30,000 a pop, and just taking out a few more battery modules I don't think is going to close the gap and start helping them break even. So R2, I even more so feel like now has to have lower range options so that they can build it more profitably. But what do you guys think of the new standard range options? Do you like it when companies software limit battery packs? Do you think Rivian should have just jumped in to the lithium iron phosphate battery game, since they're already using LFP batteries in their delivery vans? All your thoughts, let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.